Hi there. Welcome to this mini-series on what works for women at work. I'm Evelyn Axelrod, and I'll be your guide on this exciting adventure. By day, I'm the VP of the Career Foundation, an innovative nonprofit organization driving inclusive employment across Canada. Personally, I'm interested in exploring a little more about what works for women like us so we can scale learnings and accelerate gender parity. I'm all about solutions, so join me on this year-long journey and get ready to hear inspiring stories, practical lessons, and powerful mindset shifts that will create leadership transformation. Let's get started. Welcome everyone to What Works for Women at Work. Brooke Cromar joins us from Montreal today, where she's leading national initiatives in corporate social responsibility. Welcome, Brooke.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you to share your career and leadership journey with us. So maybe we get started by you telling me a little bit about how you've been spending your days lately.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, I work in corporate social responsibility and inclusion at Randstad Canada. I'm also the executive director of the Randstad Foundation. A lot of the work that I've been doing lately has been around how the Randstad Foundation can do more good with the dollars that we have at our disposal and with our grant process, and really trying to help social impact within our communities across Canada, uh, generating employment outcomes for youth. So that's what I've been spending my time on. I also work on CSR initiatives, corporate social responsibility initiatives within the company, looking at a wide range of sustainability topics. And right now, I'm working on something that is supporting Canadian Cancer Society, and helping youth with cancer.
Oh my gosh, that is definitely worth doing. And it must bring you such fulfillment knowing that your work is having such an amazing impact.
It really does. I'm someone who can't work without meaning.
Mm.
It's come up time and time again about me, that I really have to believe that it's helping, at a bigger level, for me to really want to do it and feel fulfilled by it. So I feel very grateful every day, that I get to do this work and be a part of it, and meet wonderful people like you.
Wow, that's awesome. Again, thanks for joining. I'm interested in someone like you who's doing such work with heart in the corporate space, which is not always a place that we find heart. So it's really great to see what you're doing and learn more about it. But we're talking today about strategic mindset in leadership and sort of sometimes that when we use the word strategic, it doesn't always come across as um a heart or head. Like there seems to be some misunderstanding about what strategic mindset looks like. What does that look like for you in your context and as a woman leader?
Yeah. I think at its core, there's two very important components to your question, I think. At its core, strategic thinking or strategic mindset for me is seeing the bigger picture, making decisions based on the bigger picture, having some foresight around that, being clear in where I want to go, and kind of walking through the angles, which is actually how inclusion comes into that, but I'm sure we'll get into that later. And I think as a woman, it's been very valuable for me to be able to put on that hat and look not only at the immediacy of the tasks, but also how it plays into the bigger objectives, how it aligns with goals, what those goals are. So that's been very useful for me in my career, but also as a woman, um, it allows me to maybe break some stereotypes, antiquated stereotypes that some might have around, whether, what a woman is and how she thinks, and what women decision makers look like. And I've had some wonderful mentors along the way who've kind of shown me what that can be. but really to look at, women often get saddled with a lot of extras. And so we're either strategic thinkers that are heartless, or we're all heart and compassion, and we can't, think about problems in sort of a critical way. And being a woman leader who I feel my job embodies both, puts me in a really interesting position, and gives me access to just a whole network of similar peers that are similar, and women who are in the same type of position, who are demonstrating that you can have heart and be strategic. They're not mutually exclusive. And the perception that women who are strategic are heartless is also not correct.
Mhm.
So really playing in that space as well, in sort of the change space, subtly is fun.
Yeah, it is so interesting, and the dynamics of gender, and how that plays in is also really something to think on. As you've grown in your career, how have you seen your strategic thinking evolve, and what lessons have they helped you as you moved on in your career?
Absolutely. When I was very early in my career, I really wanted to do a good job. I wanted to make my boss happy. And I ended up doing everything that they told me to do to the letter. I was just doing what I was told. And every single time I presented it to my boss, they weren't happy with the results. And I couldn't understand why. And I had a female mentor at the time who explained to me that often it's seeing around the question. It's seeing what's behind the question. What are they really asking? They think they know what the answer is, but they're not going to be happy with it because that's not really what they want to know. And being able to be curious and inquisitive around what is the heart of the problem, was a very important early lesson in how I developed my strategic thinking. And it informed how I grew and developed, as I went along my career path. And I think, given that I was in the nonprofit space for a very long time in different focus areas, including um, violence against women work, there was a lot that I learned from that, in sort of how to get behind why someone's upset, or what it really means, or what's happening here, and how that builds into the bigger picture. And through that, and in the areas that I was working in, inclusion really became a large part of that. Whose voices are at the table? What future are we talking about when we're having foresight? Is it a future that we actually want? Is it a future that we can change? What are the interplays there, that we can have to make sure that we have a more dynamic and holistic approach to it. So I think that as I've grown, that's really become where I currently am. In 10 years, I might watch this and have a different view. But as of right now, it's really, my strategic thinking is infused with a sense of what's sustainable, what's inclusive, and how do I bring different perspectives to the table, to create innovative solutions to problems that we're dealing with. And perhaps even more than that, I think this is also, I mean, I'm sure some men do this too, but I've seen this a lot with women. We take on so much, like we want to solve all the problems today. And it's not always possible. So part of being strategic is, where are the areas I can influence most successfully right now? What can I do that'll really support a new model or framework or outcome, that will lead, that we'll be able to use for other topics, but maybe not tackling everything all at once, but trying to really create change in specific areas, and then, hopefully build that forward.
Mhm. What I'm hearing you say is that strategic thinking, that strategic mindset comes from being curious. And all of the examples you just shared demonstrated the importance of asking yourself, really smart and critical questions. Like, is this the right approach for this time and the stakeholders who we're trying to support? What are the wins that we need that align with the bigger picture? Like really asking the right kinds of questions. How did you learn that? How did you come up with this sort of approach to moving through your career?
I think it starts with not being satisfied with the status quo, perhaps, like as a core part of me. But also, I think it was learning early in my career what wasn't working for me.
Mm,
And I'm someone who wants to do well, wants to really, at the end of the day, help. And so I wasn't feeling like I was able to do that. And so that's when you just start asking questions and listening. I think listening is a key part of that. I only learned how to do all of that because I listened to other people and I watched what they did. And being able to observe how different people play in different spaces, what different types of advocacy looks like was really important. And I had some really lucky opportunities. The Jane Goodall Institute of Canada was based out of Montreal. I did a lot of work with them as a volunteer, but I got to meet Jane and see how, and we went to Parliament Hill. I got to see how she interacted with politicians, see how she interacted with kids, and just get a sense of how these women most specifically were impacting change quietly.
mm,
Like you can learn a lot, you can become a really important thinker and ideator, not by constantly talking, which can be, I mean, if you're an external processor, more power to you. But I think for me, it's okay for me to embrace my internal processing power and absorb this the way it works for me, and then infuse that into my strategic thinking.
yeah. I love that. I'm so grateful that you had some examples to look to, but also you weren't satisfied, like you said, with the status quo. So asking yourself and challenging yourself, how can I become better? How can I contribute at a different level? So that's really important, I think, and that's the only way you sort of push yourself forward. It has to be internally motivated.
For sure. And it's still a journey. And that's, I think, that's hard for me because I like projects. I like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I like to be like, oh, I completed this thing. But it's not like that. It's very much a continuous evolution. And, things that worked for me maybe 10 years ago I can do better now. I know better. 5 years, 3 years, for goodness sakes, it's been a lot of life in through the pandemic. So there are a lot of things that I've had to accept about the fact that no end game here. It's just this is how life is, and I will continue to evolve with it and hopefully continue to grow. We talk a lot at Randstad about a growth mindset,
Mhm.
and that ability to continue to learn throughout your life. And I think when it comes to strategic thinking, that's really important too. What made a strong strategic thinker years ago is not necessarily what will make a strong strategic thinker heading into the next decade.
Yeah, and really, like you said it right off the top, like really understanding what the big picture is. And the big picture changes because our context is changing, our society is changing. So really sort of like trying to understand our space and what matters in this moment could change the strategy that you choose to use moving forward.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So these are things that I think there's a gap in terms of helping women learn from other women around the strategic mindset and the tools that you use to move yourself forward. For example, we are often working with other partners and working with other departments. But it's oft we many people, not just women, have challenges winning that sort of support of stakeholders. How have you approached influencing stakeholders to gain their support for your initiatives?
Great question. I think it starts with the why. I'm very, I like Simon Sinek. I follow a lot of what he says. And starting with the why is really important because if I'm going to be trying to influence someone, I have to really know my stuff. I have to know the details of it, but also that big picture, being able to answer those big questions quickly, effectively, um, right at the top. So I start by understanding the why of what I'm trying to affect, the initiative or what have you, that I'm trying to influence. And then the questions are more tactical. Who are the stakeholders? Who do I need to be consulting here? How do they like to receive information? Not everyone wants the same information. Not everyone is interested in the same thing. And how do I get the why across in a way that's relevant to them? And to that point, what's the value that it adds? Often that, in a professional context, that doesn't just mean professional value. That doesn't just mean financial value. Being able, particularly in the work I do, being able to speak to how it will develop them personally, how it will give them more satisfaction in their job or a sense of purpose, etc., is really critical. So value can look like many different things. It's not necessarily a number. So identifying what value is added, I think, is very helpful in influencing. And communicating, I think, is really critical. Being a strong communicator who can utilize different channels to speak to different audiences, and knows where to find those audiences. That's even just within an organization, within a company. Your people may not use the intranet, or they may use it exclusively. In our case, we use LinkedIn a lot to talk to each other. So, they're knowing where to find the people you want to talk to, and what to say to them, I think, is really critical in terms of how to influence and get stakeholders on side.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting what you're sharing because when you are interested in solving the problem, understanding the big picture, you do the work, you do the research to find out who's my audience, what do they care about,
Hmm.
and how do I get buy-in into this initiative because it will matter to them. So, yeah, again, really asking yourself the right questions because you're trying to solve the problem and understanding there are so many variables within it.
For sure. And I think when we're talking about variables too, it's not different truths either.
Mm,
Like I'm not talking about spin necessarily. It's just what facet of it is going to appeal to them. Because if you're doing something that is meaningful or that has, that's a large initiative, what have you, chances are there's more than one reason to do it. So you're maybe putting a different emphasis on some of those different reasons, but they're all true. And I actually think that that's another thing, that's really important when we're talking about influence. It's transparency. Don't pretend to know it all. Don't spin the truth. Call it the way you see it. Someone may disagree with you, but then you are open to dialogue and you may learn from it and it might, work out differently. Um, but transparency builds trust. And so I think that, it's important to know who your audience is and target your messages to that audience. Um, but be as transparent as possible in that process.
yeah. I love that. And I think a lot of people, not just women again, but a lot of people, as they grow in their career, they put pressure on themselves to be the experts of everything. And that's just not human. That's not just, yeah, AI hasn't taken over yet. Yeah, I mean, our role is to have honest conversations and be the facilitators of solutions for the people that we're working with. And so I think it's really important to understand, like, you don't have to be perfect at this. You just have to be human and speak to people based on what matters to them and what matters to you.
Yeah, exactly. And if there is only one angle to it and it's what matters to you, then that's part of that how you communicate. How are you going to get them to care about what you care about? And that's where communication becomes really critical. Are you sharing the why properly? Are you excited about it? Are you demonstrating and motivating um, for them that this is something that should matter to them? Because we don't all come to a topic with the same level of passion and enthusiasm, and sometimes it is a matter of uh, winning them over that this is something that they should care about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have had some really great role models in your life. And unfortunately, that's not the case for everyone. If you were to advise, people, women, young women who are aspiring to develop a strong strategic mindset in their career, what advice would you share with them?
I'm a big fan of mentorship personally. I know we're evolving it into sponsorship within organizations where women not just give, there's not a back and forth in terms of advice and learning, but also a championing of these women into leadership positions, which I think is absolutely wonderful. As a starting point, I think it's important to seek out women that you want to learn from. Um, it is daunting to reach out to someone you don't know, but I can tell you from experience because I've moved around a lot and I went to countries where I had no network and I just had to build it from scratch. You absolutely can just reach out to women and say, I saw you on LinkedIn. I was really interested in the work you do. Would you be open to a conversation with me? I would just like to learn more. It doesn't have to, sometimes it turns into formal mentorships, but sometimes it's just a great way to build a network because having a network is really what will change everything. And that network can the yes, you can have a strong online network, but when you make it tangible and when those people connect with you, it's different. So reaching out to women that you admire, they may not all respond or they may not all be able to meet with you, but you'll get some, and you will be able to get a sense of who they are really and what they're about, and hopefully get some insights from them. And that's a great place to start.
Mhm.
And you can, even within your own company, senior women leaders, especially, are always open to having those types of relationships with younger women within their organization, or at least that's been my experience.
Yeah. In your experience, when someone reaches out and there's a reciprocal agreement to be in this mentoring relationship, what are some of the questions you think young women can ask? Because I feel and I've heard from them, I don't always know what to say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think some of the questions that you've been asking me would be really good questions for them to ask, honestly. How have you questions around how they evolved their thinking? How did they start out? It's really it's really fun to be at this point in your career where you've got a whole body of work behind you, but often you don't talk about it anymore. You're just talking about what you're doing now. So I think it's a nice opportunity for the mentor, formal or informal, to also reflect on their own journey and share that with someone who's younger. And their journey won't look like what the younger person's journey will look like. The world is different. Things have changed. It's not going to be the same, but there'll be little pieces of of insight and wisdom that can be applied to their experience, to the younger generation's
Yeah.
experience. And I think that that's something that both parties would benefit from doing and having.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that women at the top of their careers are so willing to have those conversations. But younger people think, oh my gosh, I can't tell her about this challenge that I'm having. Actually, you're not alone. She actually really wants to hear that because she will resonate because it'll look something similar to what she's experienced and has overcome. And so, don't feel that you're alone and don't feel that your experience hasn't been shared among so many. Tell them what you're struggling with because that's really what this mentorship is about, right? It's about having a discussion about how do I overcome these challenges as I move through.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I think that we get to where we are because we had those conversations or because we learned those lessons. So there's nothing, there's no shame in talking about something that you didn't do perfectly or you're not sure about how to move forward with. It's actually a really important skill. How do you work collaboratively? How do you ask for help? How do you find information that you need to know? That's actually a really big one that I find in working on some youth issues is being unafraid to find the answers. And there is a courage that comes with being in a mentorship and being a mentee and asking those questions. And just finding that courage and putting yourself out there. And I think that they will be surprised at the reward that it brings them in terms of the insight that they are able to gain and the relationship that they're able to build. Because again, that comes back to transparency and authenticity. If you are your authentic self in a conversation, that will shine through and that will benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. The mentors I know appreciate when the mentee's on a learning journey and can reflect and say, you know what, I don't think I handled this well. What do you think? And so that kind of honest sort of reflection goes a long way and builds credibility as somebody who really is doubling down and wanting to improve.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves when we're young and generationally, I think there's a lot of pressure to just get it right the first time. Um, but that's not how we learn. And I heard a youth panel recently that was talking about that frustration. And I think that, the feelings that they're having about the world of work would also be improved if they're able to share those frustrations with a colleague or a mentor within their organization.
Yeah. Great work that you're doing with young people, trying to help them navigate this new world of work. It has changed for everyone. Yeah, so thank you for doing that work. As we close out, we can learn so much from you, but would love to get some resources to keep that you would recommend in terms of developing these skill sets.
Yes, absolutely. So one that I really love is Bea Boccalandro. She wrote Do Good at Work. And so it's not specific to strategic thinking, but what it is, I think the tagline is something along the lines of um, if, what is it? Let me think. Oh, yeah, if your job doesn't improve the world, then improve your job, something along those lines. And what I really, really love about it is that it's about how to infuse social purpose into your everyday activities. Strategic thinking doesn't always have to be, I created a new program that's going to change the world. Sometimes strategic thinking is, here is what I do, no matter what your job, here is what I want to see the world look like. How can I make that part of my everyday? How can I get us to a certain goal through those activities? And so I think that that book is a really great place to start in terms of, especially if you're early in your career, you may not be able to create all these new initiatives and work on programs at that level, but you can start that practice. you can practice every day in how you're going to think strategically about these problems and how you're going to use the resources that you have to affect change. So I really love that. And I also love Seeing Around the Corner by Ruth McGrath. And that book talks about the different the that like moment in time when a company either gets it right or wrong in what the future is going to bring for them. So whether you become Amazon or whether you become Blockbuster. And while it's, she's a professor, she has a very professorial approach to the research, which is great. It also, on a personal level, really you can look at it and think, okay, so this is how you build foresight in your thinking. This is what works. This is what doesn't work. And then for those young women who are going to become CEOs, apply it to where they're going to head. But just in terms of my everyday, I found there were some really useful lessons in it.
Yeah, well, they sound wonderful. I mean, and I can see now, I can see the influence of that those resources in your work. I mean, your definition of strategic mindset sounds like in one from one lens, doing work that matters and making your work matter, no matter what it is, putting that sort of purpose into your work. So I could totally see that kind of influencing what you do, Brooke. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, look, we've come to the end of a session. I feel like it's just gone so quickly, but you've shared so much with us. How can folks get in touch with you and sort of follow you and see what you're doing in the world?
Absolutely. I think the easiest way to reach me is via LinkedIn, Brooke Cromar. That's where you'll be able to find me. And I also am at Randstad, so you can reach me via my Randstad email, brooke.cromar@randstad.ca. But yeah, would be happy to connect with anyone who feels similarly or wants to learn more.
Yeah, thank you so much. You have shared such insights, and I think it's missing in the space where women need to learn from people who have gone through this already, because we don't need to keep learning from mistakes. So this is really good that you've shared these with us, helping women to think about long term, but how the short term influences the long term, I think is really important. So thank you for sharing. I really appreciate your time today. And we will continue to have conversations. Folks, if you're listening to Brooke and you want to reach out and learn more, feel free to do so. And we'll continue to have these kinds of conversations to help us grow in our career and get stronger every time. Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.